Where did you get that from?
None of your business. And don't beg me when I buy fan ice.
Are you boys ready?
Yes, Daddy.
Two young brothers explore Lagos with their estranged father during the 1993 Nigerian election crisis, witnessing both the city's magnitude and their father's daily struggles as political unrest threatens their journey home. My Father's Shadow will be screening at this year's Sydney Film Festival on the 11th, 13th, and 14th of June. Akinola Davies Jr., thank you so much for your time and welcome to the For Your Reference podcast.
Thanks for having me, Katia. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, we're just gonna just nonchalant, just very. I love that. I guess before we even get into the film, accolades, credits, we got to talk about the Cannes selection of it all. I don't even know if it sounds too familiar or if it sounds great every time you hear it. First Nigerian movie in a Cannes selection. We're bigging up today. That's what we're all about.
Sounds great. Keep going. Keep it coming.
And you're here on our little old nasty podcast that could. But how are you feeling in this moment?
Just really blessed and happy to be in a situation that the nasty podcast that could would be up for interviewing me. You know what I mean? I think it's making a film is extremely hard and tasking, and it takes a whole village to create. So I think when you have these moments, you really have to lean into enjoying them, because I think, you know, a lot of the time, even just being in Cannes, you know, I remember the first photo call, one of the few Black ladies who was involved in the whole setup was just like, just remember to enjoy it, you know, like this is a moment, like smile through it. You don't have to be so stern and serious, you know? And once she kind of said that to me, I was just like, okay, cool, I'm gonna enjoy the hell out of this, because, you know, the crew and the team back in Nigeria who maybe don't have the opportunity to travel and watch the film in these sort of spaces and these sorts of festivals, it means a lot to them to see me like enjoying the moment, you know, because I'm really just a representative of all their hard work. And yeah, Cannes really special. It's a place you kind of hear. It's up in the sort of echelons of what it means to make film, and then to get into Cannes, I feel it was like already a big victory to be the first Nigerian film in competition. Again, cherry on top of the cake, and then to have the reception. More importantly to me as a filmmaker, to have the reception that the film has, and the sort of impact that I was receiving from running into people on the street and stuff has just been really overwhelming in the best way. And then another cherry on top of a cherry on top of another cherry was to get the special mention. So yeah, it's quite surreal, to be honest, because, you know, you sort of plan out a film and you're just hoping to sort of grow incrementally. And I think as an introduction to the world, it's been beyond my sort of wildest comprehension.
And I love that. And that could be a whole different discussion of standing in it and being proud of it, and the lens. It's not pandering in any way. It's not Western white friendly. It's literally a story that needs to be told, but it's told from the lens, because representation is cool and cute, but you know, who's writing it and who the lens is pointed at is, to me, more important anyway. So the fact that you could stand in it and the film stands on it, and to be in, you know, Cannes, it's absolutely great. And, you know, you talk about a village, and it's not the first time that you've linked up with your brother in regards to the screenwriting, but in regards to the feature film of My Father's Shadow, it can only be that good, and it can only hit that realness when you're really getting real, right? And with your brother, you know, talking about the process of, you know, a memory, and I guess a hope, and, you know, a sort of figure, right? A sort of guiding light as well. What happens if it got too close, or is that a good thing? Is that currency that you're looking for when you're making a film?
Yeah, I mean, to sort of your point, I think the lens is really important. I mean, who gets to tell our stories? You know, I think for a long period as African filmmakers, you know, like the Osman Sembedes and the Diops and the and what were all sort of like up there in the echelons and really like quite militant in the way they sort of presented themselves in terms of the ownership and who gets to tell the stories. And I think somewhere along the lines, those stories kind of became a lot more dictated from an external lens, you know, and actually a perception of that's how we're meant to see ourselves, and that's what we're force fed in terms of how we see each other. Because cinema is really powerful, you know. I think it's really powerful, you know. I think, you know, maybe I'm borrowing from Sembene again because he's one of my idols. It's just saying, you know, like the camera is a weapon, you know, and I think being able to tell our own stories in a world that's fastly moving towards everything being a lot more visual has to be kind of something a group of us artists kind of centralize and sort of own for ourselves, because it does so many things. Just let's put My Father's Shadow to bed for one side, right?
Okay, but we're going to come back on that.
We will come back. I'll deviate back, but like the sort of what it does for you to see yourself depicted in a manner in which you can relate with, what that does for like your spiritual, your mental, your physical health. I know that might sound quite ground to people who aren't sort of like cinephiles or obsessed with film, but just seeing yourself represented in a manner in which you can represent, which you can identify with, I think is really humanizing. It kind of grounds a lot of what your mothers did and your aunts did and your fathers did, and sort of normalizes all those things for you, you know, whereas opposed to like a different lens who only like positions you, at least through the 90s, as Africa is this continent of just like starving people with flies on their face and stuff like that. It's like I didn't grow up in that reality. I'm not saying it didn't exist, but that was not my reality, you know. And actually coming back to My Father's Shadows, like working with my brother, we just really wanted to create the visualization of a place that we grew up in and that we recognized. And coming to more specifically is like, is it too close? I mean, I guess working with a sibling, like the foundation of our relationship is like truth, or not really being able to hide from the truth, because we're brothers. We don't really skirt around, you know, we don't need to fabricate things, because we can hold ourselves accountable in a certain way. And I think just for me as an artist, the closer you get to truth is the more you get to like a real feeling of whether people love or hate something. And for me, I don't mind whether they love or they hate it. I just mind that you have an emotional reaction to it, because I think that's what truth represents to me as an artist. I just want you to feel something. And I think if it's born out of a place of truth, then not that it can't be denied, but it resonates more because people can acknowledge that that's a truth that they felt at some point in their lives. And I think, mining our personal grief hasn't been easy. I have to say it, you know, the film is wonderful, but again, I just pay virtue to all my collaborators, but there's been a lot of hand holding. There's been a lot of like emotional work done over the course of making the film, even for myself as a grown ass man. You know, I think it's taken this amount of time for me to be able, and my brother to be able to be comfortable enough to want to sort of explore this topic for ourselves as men moving into the world in relation to how we treat the women in our lives, how we treat our siblings, how we treat our family, how we treat our offspring. I'm not fortunate to be a father yet, but my brother is, and how we sort of like can how we can take a little bit of accountability of like talking about our relationships with our fathers, what they had to go through, what we have to go through, and not making it this like perfect cookie cutter experience, because it's not. It's warts and all. It's messy, it's ugly, but at the same time, if we're not going to do it, then we're leaving the work to someone else. So yeah, truth is very important to us, I'd say.
And it's because we're independent film podcasters and film critics, and the thing I would say is we're a lot of our cultures we're natural storytellers, right? And it obviously there are credentials, and it's important to, you know, be schooled up on particular sort of techniques, but it's all stories at the end of the day. And to be an expert on all stories just because you watch a lot of films, I would question, Like how can you be an expert on experiences that you've never lived before, right? Your
100%.
understanding and your enjoyment of a film is within your sometimes very limited, very unseasoned scope. It's all very in there, right? But there was something that I just wanted to pick on what you said, is there are different fights we need to fight, right? When it
Yeah.
comes to telling our own stories. I'm Tongan, I'm Pacific Islander. So there's people that are willing to fight that narrative of
Mm,
whatever sort of, like, for me, like noble savages and that sort of thing. People are there to fight that. I'm not. I'm like,
mm,
once you're here, let's talk about it. Let's get inside of the fale, let's get inside of the house, and let's
mm,
talk about it properly, right? So
mm-hmm.
there are different sort of narratives and different sort of fights that we need to fight. And I think it's quite a beautiful thing that whether you needed to or whether you didn't, that wasn't even a conversation. We're here and we're telling that story. If you have those sort of outdated sort of stereotypes about Nigeria, that's not even that. Like, you need to do your own work, baby, and then you
100%.
come back and then you can watch the
100%.
film.
100%. But I think that's what art is. I think in what you guys are doing as an independent podcast, yapping is an art form. So it's not,
Mm.
it might seem like such a simple thing, but you're having conversation. And I think in those conversations, as a generation, we're so like fortunate, whether you find it good or bad, we're so tapped into each other that actually like we're moving beyond that. We're transcending that. We're just now claiming space in a capacity that like intellectually, at least like performative for that side we can do, but for ourselves we can do as well. And I think even coming back to the storytelling, my film is a good film. Like, I hold my hands up, I snapped on it, but at the same time, it was really important to my collaborators saying that we really want to try and represent a type of storytelling. We want to try and encapsulate people in the feeling. It might have a lot of shortcomings in terms of like your more traditional aspects, how you tell a story, A to B to C to D. But like, I think indigenous people, we've always told stories from the dawn of time. That's what is synonymous with being a human, telling stories.
Yeah.
Everything is how you frame a story. And I think ultimately what we decided to do in this film is we just wanted to tell a story that we'd be proud of and happy to read. And actually that just happened to be something that we have such a vested interest in, which is family, which is really about our community, And I think, yeah, that's kind of our North Star in a way, I guess.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we go through moments where we idolize, or we see our parents as superhuman,
Mm.
and we get to a point where you're like, oh shit, you don't know what's happening either. Like, you're
Yeah.
like, respectfully, in a good way, like, you don't know
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
going on, you're trying to figure it out. And this
Mm-hmm.
is what we see in My Father's Shadow as well. And I guess for you and Wale, what was it like seeing the difficult, and maybe even sometimes broken parts of your father in particular, for this film? And how was it? I guess, was it because there's always that need to, like, not necessarily protect, but like you keep it for you. Was there a bit of keeping for you, or was it some of it putting on the page as well?
That's a really good question. I guess with the film, like, we didn't know our father. So our father passed when we were really young. So they gave us a scope to have a lot of creative license. I guess for me, the real intricacy is like seeing what my siblings thought of the character we put on screen. Because obviously he's not meant to be our father. He's like a different character. But there's a lot he sort of embodies. But equally, like, we didn't know him. So we create this fictional character and they watch it and they're like, okay, we kind of see it, but that's obviously different from the person that they knew as well. But I think a lot of what we tried to do again is just hold ourselves accountable. I think we could have taken a lot of like easy options, but I think we had to sort of bring into the room in as much as possible. Like, we're men, we're like relatively charming men. Like, where does that lead you? What sort of circumstances does that put you in? As a father who's trying to provide for a family, like, what circumstances does that put you in? And I think we did have some debate about some aspects of the film where we really chewed the fat, like, should we put this in? Shouldn't we put this in? But again, I think it's just all in service of trying to create someone who feels real as opposed to like a caricature, because we could have gone down the route of making Falari, played by Shokwe Dirisu, like very like holier than thou, perfect dad, no
Oh, he was a
flaws.
menace in these streets. You could
Yeah, he's a
tell.
menace, man. He's a menace in the streets. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's what makes him relatable, because for as much as like we can be these like really front-facing, positive, progressive people, like we have our flaws, we have our hang-ups,
Got that
we have the
dog.
way we,
Got that dog.
you know what I mean? We got that dog. We got the way you respond to things based on triggers and stuff like that. And I think for us, it was just really important, you know, that if we were gonna only make one film, because that's the mindset we were in when we were writing. Like, look, if we're only gonna make one film, we might as well just go for broke. You know, we might as well just really lay it out on the line, because if this ends up being our only contribution to like African cinema or Nigerian cinema, we need it to be something that feels extremely pure in a way that we haven't seen before.
Yeah.
And actually just having that as a North Star just didn't make those choices easier, because like I'm a grown-ass man, like I said before, but in the editing process, I was grieving. I didn't even realize I was grieving. There's an edit that no one will ever see that I was like, that's the film, you know? And then I had to get talked off a pedestal and be like, maybe you need to try and take a few days off and understand why you're fighting everyone, you know? And I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to go to a lake and just like sit by the lake for a few days. And I came back and I watched the film again. I was like, okay, cool. I need to create the best version of this film. And I need to be able to let go of certain aspects that I'm trying to cling onto, because I believe they represent this person that's kind of really instrumental to my life, but you guys don't know, but I've let everyone in on this experience. So it's like, as I'm a collaborator, as everyone's really invested in this, I had to find ways to just like let things go. And I think that's actually for me been a more of a like internal personal journey for me, is just like trusting the people that I've worked with, my producers, my execs, everyone just really like they have my back, and I felt very held making this story. And I think moving forward, it's a good dynamic to have in these sort of relationships, basically.
Because you don't have to suffer for the art, right? And the
Yeah,
art
you
can
really
still
don't.
be good.
Yeah, you
We
really
can be
don't.
held and we can be embraced.
Yeah, but I think that's what we need. I think we need to be held more. I think that's kind of I won't get on a political soapbox, but I do think that's kind of where we're at in society, is like we're not able to hold space for each other, you know? Like everybody's a bit tapped in their own way, but it's like, okay, if I can understand why you're tapped and you can understand why I'm tapped, maybe we don't have to agree, but we can start looking for solutions as opposed to like just screaming at each other or whatever. And I think in making the film, I realized that like, if you give people a little bit of rope to give them context about why something's happening, and you bring them on side to sort of see like, this is what it's really like, you know, like our European point of view is this, but actually the reality on ground is like, you know, okay, I'll give you an example. There was loads of notes of being like, wouldn't the kids just ask their father, like, where are you going? Or what are you doing? I'm like, I don't think you've ever, yeah, I was like, I don't think you've ever been an African child in an African household. You do not ask your parents those kind of questions, you know. Maybe in Europe you do, and that's a privilege that you guys are afforded, but we were not afforded. You would get a slap in the face or you know, or a rap.
You wouldn't even see it coming. You'll just be on the floor.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even, just quickly on becoming a guinea fowl, literally just did an interview with Rungano, and
I love Rungano.
And I was like, thank you, like that she actually said yes to an interview, like it was but she talked about grief and like for not the uncle in regards to the film, but like planning for the funeral, and she had, I think she said European, not white, but she had a European friend. I was like, why don't you just don't do it? And I'm like, that's not even a question, that's what I said.
It's not even a question.
Yeah, right. So I think it's just the calibrating of like cultural compatibility, or you know, that sort of understanding. And
100%.
but I'm all for it. Like if we're gonna eat the whole meal, we're not gonna eat around the edges. And I feel
100%.
like we would be very dangerous, and we could talk for hours about, you know, but it is the whole meal. And I guess it comes to nationhood, because I wanted to touch on that a little bit. My partner OT, he's Kenyan. So it was interesting because he talks about like in high school there was like a debate, like he was on a debate team of like, once independence was gained, are Kenyans truly independent, right? Or are the colonial structures still in there? It's a whole conversation, right?
Yeah.
And in regards to my father's shadow, we're talking about not the same, but a similar of like we're at the intersection, right? At a boiling point of military rule, democracy, and they call them matatus, but I think in the subtitles it said buses. Like in Kenya, they call them.
Yeah, we call them mulues or
Oh,
goslo. Yeah.
and it was kind of like, and also like barbershop sort of conversations. Like we had a sort of microcosm of different sort of opinions and attitudes. One time there was a priest that got in with his Bible and he started preaching, but that's a different story for
Yeah.
another day.
Nice.
But I guess I wanted to talk about that, and
The
obviously it
nationhood,
was very important, and including that in the film.
100%. Firstly, I'll say we have a big Kenyan uh, ambassador within the film. Our script supervisor is from Kenya. His name is Martin Nakabete. He's fantastic script supervisor. One of the unsung heroes, as there are so many in the film. But coming to your question about nationhood, yeah, I mean, I think there's like a parallel, you know, when the film was originally a short that my brother wrote, and it was just about the family aspect. And when we got into the idea of developing it into a feature, we wanted to bring Nigeria into it. Or we were thinking in terms of how do you make this, how do you expand it? And I think setting it in that time felt quite expansive because it mirrors on a micro level, you have the kids wanting to know their father, wanting to understand, and this dream of like getting to know their dad and being with them forever and X, Y, and Z. And on the macro, you have this nationhood idea and MKO Abiola, who was this kind of statesman that everybody was really like excited about. And everybody thought, okay, this is going to be like the father of the country. We're going to move towards something really progressive. Like everyone in my mother's generation was like really excited, and the enthusiasm was palpable because the military had just been brutal for like however many years. It's just been censorship, brutal dictatorship, acquisition of like the country's resources and like filling their coffers with millions, and equally being sort of cronies of the like imperialist cronies, effectively, you know.
Follow the
Even
thread.
though we were like banned from the Commonwealth and stuff like that because of their heinous crimes or whatever, human rights atrocities and stuff like that. So we were made the scapegoat. But we thought that those two things really matched up really well, and it was really important because actually for a period of time under the military dictatorship, history was banned from being taught in schools.
Yeah.
So actually the film kind of doubles up as this kind of historical like family heirloom for Nigerians, because there's a period of our contemporary history that people don't necessarily know about, and that was another sort of, you know, you're dealing with memory, you're dealing with time that felt very sort of like plausible as a thematic for the whole film, because actually this family is dealing with children like memories and time, and then the nation is also dealing with memories and time and how people sort of like remember it. So those two things like felt pretty hand in hand, and we worked with like fantastic researchers to be able to speak and sort of like ask them about that period of time to try and get back. But really and truly, I think like Nigeria is a really complex, beautiful, wonderful collection of tribal people all like forcibly put into this place with each other, and that in of itself in the context of Nigeria is still quite young. It's like 60, 70 years old, but in the grand scheme of things it's really young, and all these kingdoms are very proud and forthright people, but then resources don't get distributed as equally and stuff like that. And I think there's a certain level of that period of time that the film set that people were thinking we're going to reach a phase where like there's a lot more equity for everyone, you know. Under this guy, it felt like Abiola was a Yoruba, which is my tribe, one of the largest tribes. He was a Muslim, so he had multiple wives from different tribes. So everyone is like buying into him because they were like, oh, you married our daughter from here and all over the country. So he had this kind of like Zen diagram of like of groundwork he'd been doing in his personal life, in his business life, to sort of come with the receipts of being this person. And by all accounts, subsequently, he was also like smart enough to like undercut the British and the Americans, you know. So everybody was like, okay, this guy he's not going to take it from everyone. He's not going to take it lying down. And to sort of have to sort of have that period sort of stolen from my mum's generation. I probably won't. The closest I would maybe feel to that is maybe like quote unquote like a Jeremy Corbyn in terms of a few years ago when we were all sort of voting and everybody was really coalesced in terms of the youth of this country to move in a different direction. And then the sort of assassination job on him was like pretty in depth. But I don't even think that compares to what my mother's generation were dealing with and what they were sort of robbed of. But I think, I just think in terms of contemporary history, that is a real rupture in terms of the trust being lost in the political system before it was even born.
Yeah. And I think it was interesting having like just subtle little cultural nods, like even like piercing through to like my cultural sensibilities of like, let me hold $1. Like, like if I got nothing, you get something. Like that's just how it works. But I guess reflecting, because you mentioned Osman Sembène, and there was a retrospective of him last year. It's like Friends and Lovers. I don't know why you're going and seeing all the white films, because we end up finding all the African and Asian. We find all the different films. But there was a retrospective, and Mendabi was what I was thinking about watching My Father's Shadow, because Mans was just trying to get paid, to be honest.
Man, I love that film, man. The sort of journey that guy has to go on. Is that the one where he's just trying to cash this check from
because he didn't have the identification for the money order.
That's the one. I showed my brother that film in our reference. I was like, bro, this is real, because you have to go through so much bureaucracy just to get what you are owed, and just like all the pressure that comes with that, like his wife like telling people and taking loans and getting food. It's like, bro, we haven't even got this money and we've spent it already,
giving rights away that you don't have to give away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think Sembène was so far ahead of his time, man. I think he was just like an outlier. Like Mulade is one of my favorite films of all time. The subject matter of that film, when I watched it back, I was like, this feels like a sci-fi movie, but on a very grounded level. And I would, even just to have a sort of a fraction of the career he had would be an absolute dream come true, man, because he's the daddy.
Well, I guess you're the baby daddy, because you're on your way.
You're the baby daddy.
That's a soundbite. Yeah, you are the baby daddy. But I want to thank you so much for your time and wrap up with our final question. You pretty much answered it, but we finish off our reviews with a recommendation. So, what would you pair with My Father's Shadow as a double feature?
Ooh, that is a good question. Does it have to be new? It can be.
No, we go anywhere you want to go.
Well, I think I would. So that's a tough question. I think I would probably have to reference another film coming out of Nigeria. I think it would probably be My Desire. It's called Eyimofe, made by another set of brothers. It won Black Star Film Festival, and the Air Lizard won Sundance. It's an incredible triple story of like people sort of trying to, get documentation to try and leave Nigeria, and equally I think it's within the same like Nollywood art house spectrum family tree that My Father's Shadow exists in. So I'd probably say that, and I'd probably say Rongana's film as well, Becoming Guinea Fowl. I think that's like a sensational bit of cinema that needs to be seen by everyone, because it's another metric of trying to hold your family accountable. It's not an easy conversation. It's not a sexy story, but it is an important one, because I think we have to, in our communities, previously we did much, this is probably pre-colonial, we did much better jobs of coming together as a community to hold people accountable and formulate systems for them to sort of, for their, what's the word? Not recuperation, what's the word when you sort of like fix people? For their not restoration, but the word. When basically the word for when people are restored back into the community. And I think Rongana's film is like a wonderful example of that. It kind of encompasses what it means for a family to be grieving in a different context, and how important it is to kind of like not hide from these sort of taboo subjects. And I think she's a masterful author, basically.
Yeah. And I guess just very quickly, we had to go to a different media screening, and then I came home because we got these interviews. I had a double feature of On Becoming a
Sure.
Guinea Fowl and My Father's Shadow. And yeah, it was a gorgeous, tiring day, but it was a gorgeous double feature watch. But Akinola, I've taken all of your time. But to all the menaces in the streets, to all of the baby daddies, thank you so much for your time.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Katya.